Hey there, everyone. Jim here with Fantasy for the Ages, show where a father and son get together sometimes. No Zach here today. And we talk fantasy, science fiction, and other nerdy things that we enjoy. Today, I've got a rapid review episode for you. I've owed this to you for a while now. This is my full spoil review of House of Chains, the fourth book in Malazan Book of the Fallen. This is not something you should watch if you haven't read this book yet. But if you have, I hope you'll watch and enjoy. And if you do enjoy it, don't forget to like it down below. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, we would love if you become one of our many subscribers and leave comments for us on what you hear here down below. Here. That's kind of weird. And look in the show notes for all the other ways you can interact with Zach and I, including our Discord server and becoming one of our Patreon supporters. Thank you, Patreon supporters. So, House of Chains, man, another fantastic entry in Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. I really see this book as two different books. They certainly connect, but they're strikingly different in story style and tone. The first part of the book is the story of Karsa Orlong, some different species of creature. We understand we meet him as a Teblor warrior, part of a warrior caste community, very similar in design to Native American lifestyle back in the day, before United States expansionism totally crushed and destroyed Native American way of life. They have so many things that are in common to that approach to lifestyle that, it's recognizable what you're seeing. Also, when you're meeting Karsa Orlong, it's recognizable what you're seeing. He is a headstrong, young, hot-blooded punk warrior out to prove himself and sure that nobody is right except him. Sounds like many a teenager I've met and some 20-year-olds. Not all of you. I'm not talking about you who watch this channel. You are the cool people. But my goodness, he is on a mission. He has a plan, something he's wanted to do since he was young, and now it's his time. He's old enough to do this, despite the fact that the elders of the community, even the older ones of his family, are saying, Karsa, this is not a good idea. You shouldn't do it. What is driving him to move forward with his vision for himself, his destiny, and dragging two of his companions along with him? Well, he thinks it's the gods, his Teblor gods, the faces in the rocks, whom have actually spoken directly to him. Now, that is not normal. That has happened before, but it's not common. So he genuinely has had these gods speak to him and empower him to go off and fulfill his destiny. We, as the readers, come to understand there's more to these gods than meet the eye, especially Karsa Orlong's eyes, and they don't really care about him. They don't care about his good. They don't care about his success. They are using him. He is a pawn. Not that he knows it. Fascinatingly, we come to learn that part of the mission he's on is to go and kill a whole bunch of children. Okay, that's horrifying. What? Okay, not children like you think. These are a different species, race, creature of some sort. And interestingly enough, as they descend out of the mountains to where the children are, we find out the children are people, humans. Because Karsa Orlong, the Teblor, they are not human. They are something different. They're much taller, massive, powerful. They definitely look kind of like small giants to the children who run in terror. Although that's what's expected, that's not exactly what Orlong eventually finds, because they come at him. They don't just fall over and die. They resist. It gets pretty bloody. More about that in just a moment. One of the experiences Karsa Orlong and his companions have along their trek, their journey pursuing destiny, and something that actually leaves one of his companions mentally incapacitated, is they come upon a being that's trapped under a rock. A demon? Nobody really knows. All you can see is the hand flopping out here and occasionally twitching. It's been here for eons, as far as anyone knows, and yet it's still alive. They actually decide, let's move the rock. Let's try to free this thing, which they do, and it doesn't go well for them. This being is some sort of ascended immortal named Forcastle. Okay, we don't get a lot of what the heck this is about, other than this thing does spare Karsa Orlong and leaves, and you get the sense we're going to learn more about that later. But that's all we get in this story. Malazan does that at times. You get these little things that happen that you just know that means something that you don't get to understand yet. That's probably why rereading this series will be amazing. So Karsa Orlong and his two companions, one who is now not mentally all there, actually kind of thinks of himself as a dog or wolf. They continue on the journey. And while they wreak havoc on the children, they still don't manage to come out okay. Karsa Orlong believes he's unstoppable, that he's a person of destiny, that his mission cannot be overcome, that the gods are with him, and nope. He ends up a captive slave. That's the last thing he would ever have wanted. And his friends, they're both dead. While enslaved, he does make a friend, one of the other enslaved individuals, and they break free and they get away, only to get captured again and end up under the power of the same slave master that had him the first time. But after other things that happen and go on, they do end up free again, this time for good. And wow, Karsa Orlong, he wreaks some revenge on that slave master who comes into his possession. A delightfully nasty end for this guy, although it's not the end. And we'll see more of him later in the story, though I don't think I'll talk more about him here. But ugh, that was nasty what he does to him. Killing him would have been a mercy. Right near the end of this first section, we finally see Karsa Orlong end up with a new companion, Leomin, or Leomin. I haven't done an audiobook, I just read. Lomin? Lots of different ways you could pronounce it, maybe, but at this point, we realize what's going on here, because Lomin is going to take Karsa Orlong with him back to his home continent, which is where Deadhouse Gates took place. These are the two that we first met back in Deadhouse Gates, who were the original protectors, guardians of Shaik, who is killed when we first meet her, practically. Oh, goodness. And it kicks off the whirlwind and the big rebellion on that continent. The one that ends up with the chain of dogs and the death of Coltrane and all sorts of Malazans as they trek across a whole continent. And, you know, that whole story. Oh, my goodness. Okay, these two were right there. So this is a how it gets started story. So now we understand a little bit more about Orlong, who we have learned here is a Toblakai warrior, an ancient warrior race that they're completely out of touch with. His own people, you know, the Teblor, they don't know their history. They don't know what they once were. Now he's getting somewhat reconnected with the past. The second part of the story then ties into this first part, and we learned that first part was actually like flashback. It took place before the events we've seen in these first three books, Gardens of the Moon, Deadhouse Gates, Memories of Ice. Farther back. Now we get the things that are current, continuing our story in Malazan Book of the Fallen. We have so many key events and revelations here. As we saw starting at the end of Deadhouse Gates, Felisin of House Perrin, sister of Gano's Perrin, who was sent off to the Otaro mines by her sister, who is now the Malazan adjunct, Tavor Perrin. She's now the new Shaik. And we learn here this isn't just posture. She is partially possessed by the spirit of the whirlwind, which we eventually come to understand in this story is a true entity, an insane, trapped spirit left over from ages ago. Now, Tavor, again, Tavor Perrin, that adjunct, she's now on this continent too. She has been sent by the Empress to squash the rebellion against the Malazan Empire, which means the two sisters are now the leaders of separate forces in direct conflict. Although Tavor has no idea Shaik is actually her sister Felicin. And that leads to one of the great tragedies of the series. See, Felicin believed that Tavor sent her to the Atararo mines as a move to eliminate her as a sacrifice to the Empress, basically proving nothing was more important than serving the Empress, and that was her entry into her position as adjunct and all the power she now controls. Yeah, sorta. Okay, Tavor had to make it look that way, but she loves her sister Felicin. She never intended her to suffer as she did. She had made plans to get Felicin out of the mines after the move was done. Felicin's own actions, taking agency for things and trying to make the best of a horrible circumstance while in the mines, and then getting hooked on drugs and sex and all sorts of bad things that happen. Those actions of Felicin get in the way of Tavor's plans. Felicin eventually does get free from the mines, but she's got a bitter enmity towards Tavor and what Tavor did to her. And again, Tavor never meant things to get so bad for Felicin. But you can't predict the future. So now Felicin knows Tavor is on the continent, bringing the Malazan army at her people, those in rebellion that she is now the nominal leader of. There's all sorts of politics and magic involved in all that, but Felicin is in charge because she's not just a puppet. She actually is tapped into the whirlwind goddess, who, as the book goes along, takes more and more, greater and greater possession of Felicin. Felicin is less and less in touch with who she really was, and is more and more now the whirlwind goddess, who I mentioned already is insane. Tavor has never forgotten Felicin. She knows the plans she put in place did not come to be. She has sent other agents now, people we've met in previous books, to come out and find what happened to Felicin. And here's the biggest tragedy. They find out Felicin is Shaik and that she's possessed. And they see that she becomes unpossessed just in time for Tavor to kill her. And Tavor has no idea she just killed her sister. In fact, she's only able to kill her sister and not be killed by Felicin and her magical power as the whirlwind goddess because they free her from the whirlwind goddess. And she's momentarily stunned and run through. Wow. Wisely, those who knew the truth of the matter do not reveal to Tavor she just killed her little sister. What a mess. It was like, oh, that's the biggest moment of this book. Some people, I understand, don't like this book very much because that's kind of the pinnacle. That's the culmination of it. I'm like, no, that was good. I mean, that was deep. That was moving. So many pieces coming into play and coming together. And it's like a Greek tragedy. It's Shakespeare. It's beautiful. But indeed, yes, tragic. Okay, we also have a lot going on in this book with gods and ascended beings, including, we learn, the bridge burners. Many of the bridge burners aren't gone, they're ascended. And they get involved here, especially thanks to some of the bridge burners who are, the few that are still alive. Some of them are here in this mess and kind of connect to what happens. And so these ascended beings, these bridge burners, they really make a difference in the end result where the whirlwind goes away and instead this whole desert floods. Things transform. It kind of washes away most of the rebellion, most of what had gone bad. There are a few who escape and survive from both sides. Most of the Malazan folks, they do fine. but it doesn't go well for some of the others. Now, one of the ones that it does go well for, but in a different sort of way, is good old Karso Orlong, who, in the midst of all the things that's happened here in this story, has become the knight of the House of Chains, the new house that's on the playing field of the gods. This is stuff tied in with previous books, of course. And this is the broken god, the crippled god, the one who fell from the heavens, was brought to this planet through magical means, and is trying to make a play for power and perhaps revenge now. We think he's the big bad of the series, but maybe he's justified. Maybe he's not that bad. Stuff that we're going to learn. But he has pulled in Karsa Orlong into his service. And that should be interesting, because Karsa Orlong, who's come into his own, who has all his companions and the spirits of all those he's killed following him everywhere, he's not exactly an I take orders type of knight. So this should be interesting. Also of note, we've got that priest, former priest, Malazan historian from book 2, the guy with no hands, who has spirit hands now. Okay, he has transformed as well now to become, oh man, I forget the term exactly, and I didn't write it in my notes, but he's working for one of the other gods now, the tiger god, the new god of war, and he's taken on this persona. There's stuff going on here. I might have messed up exactly how I said that, because again, I'm just throwing that one in. It's one more thing that came into my mind as I'm talking here, but that's the point. This is Malazan. There is so much to these books. And I didn't even mention some of the side plots that I think are huge for the overarching story. The most significant, I will take just a moment to talk about, and that's the one involving a Talamas, who is a rogue, separate from the main body of Talanamas. Anrock, something like that. He has come upon a Tisti Adur, some other parallel plane of existence, this guy named Troll Sengar, and he rescues him from death. Now, we had seen reference to Tisti Adur back in Dead House Gates. They were like dead, but we'd seen they had magical abilities, and we have some of the Malazan soldiers who end up benefiting from this, maybe in some other warren. But we sense the Tisti Adur are mostly gone, maybe all gone. They're related in some way to the Tisti Ande, like Andamander Rake, but a darker cousin. Well, in this book, we meet one, Troll Sengar, so they're not all gone, but there's a story. We also meet a third Tisti, the Tisti Leozans, and I do not like them much. They seemed a bunch of self-righteous, okay, the word I want to say I don't use, so you get the point. But all this tells us there is much more to learn, particularly about the backstory between the 3 different types of Tisti. And Troll Sengar, he knows some of this. He promises to tell the group he's with now some of that story. And he starts the story as the book ends, because that's book 5, Midnight Tides. I was quite eager to get into that next story, therefore. I really enjoyed this one, though. House of Chains, man, the depth, the complexity, the way it ties together so much of what has previously happened through all of these first 4 books. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I was already in love with Malazan Book of the Fallen as a series, but this book took my appreciation to a whole new level. I love how Erickson just continues to peel back the onion layers of this world he's created, this massive, complex plot. And little by little, we continue to understand his creation that much more, as we also, of course, are overwhelmed by the story that is so much deeper than we realize. We get a little more of that story each book, and I'm loving how we're getting it both moving forward and looking back and seeing the past. Just loving it. And I've now started Midnight Tides. Just as good as I could hope for. That's where I'll leave you then. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time.